Hey Jamie, do you know ASMR videos? This is probably gonna be kind of like that because we have to be super quiet so that Dad can sleep. Jamie, show me your best ASMR. I'll wait until 10:03 and then I'll call her back.
By then she'll have found new friends.
By then she'll have found new friends.
I have decided that for Halloween, which I know it's for...
I wanted to talk about this too.
What do you want to be?
What do you want to be?
I was going to be Peggy Carter.
Oh my gosh,
I really
that's
wanna
so
be
good.
Peggy. What do you want to do for Halloween?
I wanted to get a group of people to dress up as BuzzFeed Unsolved characters.
Oh my god, I would love that so much. Can I be Shane?
Oh my gosh, be Shane. I wanted to be the East Hall woman.
I've connected the two dots. You didn't connect shit.
I've
I've connected them.
That's enough for you. We should call Vaishnavi. Alright, let's call Vaishnavi and let it begin.
Hello, I'm so sorry I missed the call.
Hello.
There was a meeting at the church that I had to let out. I was just escorting some people out. But I'm here.
Wonderful.
I'm here, and we're let's get ready to film.
Oh my gosh, let's actually do this.
But yeah, I'm so excited to have you both here. Maggie, can I hear your voice?
Hi Vaishnavi, it's so nice to hear you again. Oh.
Okay.
Alright, so yeah, let's get some poppin'.
Alright, so what are we talking about today?
Yeah, today we're talking about the history of bisexuality.
Of course we are.
In honor of Pride Month.
Happy
which
Pride
is
Month, everyone.
This month.
I got a quote for us to start. So,
Let's hear the quote.
your girl
It's a good quote.
has had an interesting afternoon hitting the books, hitting the interwebs, to unearth the history, mostly ancient history,
Yes.
of bisexuality. I wanted to start with a quote from Freud. So Freud said,
The best
I know.
philosopher.
So I'm
Like,
gonna
we know all of his theories were correct all of the time.
exactly, and that's what I think this quote really illustrates.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, quote: "A man's heterosexuality will not put up with any homosexuality, and vice versa." So, I want to say, this is also the guy who said that every son wants to bone his mom. Like, that very much did happen.
Wait.
So, Freud, wrong about a lot of
Wait.
things. So the truth is that
Yeah.
the history of bisexuality, bisexual expression, dates back way, way, way to the past.
Yep.
So if it's okay, I wanted to start talking about ancient Japan, actually.
Yeah.
Because they got some interesting stuff in there. So yeah, it's like a history of Japan, but it's like a sex history of Japan, right? Good times. The
History
video-
of Japan is
yeah.
great.
Bill
Can we-
Works.
Can we put a link to that?
Get on it. We can put the link in the description.
We'll put a link to History of Japan
Okay.
in the description.
Okay, so in ancient Japan, this is really in like the 11th century Heian period.
Yeah.
So
I was just about to ask, is this in the Heian period?
it isn't a Heian period.
I wonder how I knew.
Yeah, so young boys trained from and had sexual relationships with their samurai mentors. And then the sexual component ended when the boy came of age, but the friendship, or shudo, lasted throughout life. And here's a little wordy Wednesday fact for us. So shudo comes from the Japanese word wakashudo, which means literally the way of adolescent boys. And then in certain areas of Japan, this is something I think is incredibly interesting and was very consistent across all of the cultures and eras that at least I read up on, in certain areas of Japan during the Heian period, there were considered to be 3 genders. So woman, man, and then attractive young man.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting.
So basically, you're either a girl, a guy, or an anime character.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
woman, a man, or you're like a J-rock band member.
Yeah.
So
That's hilarious.
yeah, for real, and that was something that came up. It came up, I think, in Greek texts as well. And then it came up in where else did it come up? Oh, it came up in the Kama Sutra.
Wow.
Which, and I'd like everyone to know that this afternoon.
I'd like everyone to know that my name is Katie Davis and I read the Kama Sutra for fun.
I read the entire thing this afternoon.
Katie, it's so long.
I needed one quote, and I read the entire Kama Sutra.
Do you want to maybe explain to the audience
So
what
this
the
is what
Kama
I do
Sutra
on
is?
Friday night?
Yeah.
For those who don't know potentially what it is.
Sure. Wait, Vaishnavi, do you want to explain what the Kama Sutra is?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I feel like so I'm Indian, and I'm Hindu. We have different sutras. So I feel like the Kama Sutra is really weirdly misinterpreted. And anytime I see corporations appropriating it, like IKEA had like the bedroom sutra or something about like how to make the best bedroom, or like sometimes people have like I recently saw today the camera sutra of like how to hold your camera appropriately. But so the Hindu people have different sutras that we follow for a good life, and they revolve around different things. Like we have like a Danya Sutra, which is like righteous deeds, and we have like a like different like Guru Sutras, like things that basically they're like doctrines of like how to live your best life. And the Kama Sutra is one of them. So ancient Hindu texts recognize sexuality as an important part of life, really, which is so important, not really something that we see in some modern religions. So the Kama Sutra is basically a description of how to live your best sexual life. And most people think it revolves around like sex positions, or like it's just like a big list of sex positions. But it's more than that. It's kind of like a book that describes like how to have a healthy like romantic life, like relationships between husbands, wives, and they have a lot of descriptions of same-sex relationships also. So they have relationships. They have descriptions of like gay men, but in addition to that, they have descriptions of relationships between women. So lesbianism is present in the Kama Sutra, and lesbians were called Svadini, which means independent women. And so so this was just present throughout the Kama Sutra, and I feel like Western people, or people who aren't very familiar with the idea, have a different idea of it as just like a big book of sex positions, but it's a lot more than that. It's really an important educational and cultural resource. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
That was a wonderful description. I just thought that would be helpful for our viewers. Yeah.
So what do you know anything about? I mean, of course you know everything, but do you have do you know of any examples of bisexuality depicted in the Kama Sutra or in other related texts?
I'm not fully sure about bisexuality, but there is a lot of homosexuality that is discussed in the Hindu epics. There is an example of bisexuality, so, and I'll tell you the story. Long ago, there was a demon, and she was just like wreaking havoc, and she cursed really hard one day and received a wish basically from Lord Brahma, which is who is the Hindu god of creation. And basically, her wish was that I should only be destroyed by a man who is born of two men.
Wait, Vaishnavi, go back up. A man born with what?
A man who was born from two men.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry, you broke up there.
Yep.
Yeah. So a man who was born from two men. And so they were just like, oh shoot, like how are we gonna do this?
Right.
Yeah. So
how are we gonna pull this
eventually, what happened was Lord Shiva, who is one of the most important gods in Hindu, there are three main gods, and Lord Vishnu, who is also one of our three main gods, came together to produce a son. But so Lord Vishnu had a wife, has a wife still, Goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of love and fortune. And then Lord Shiva also had a wife, Goddess Durga, who is like one of the chief goddesses of Hinduism. And so what happened was Lord Vishnu transformed into his second form of Mohini, which literally means beautiful woman. And Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu, they say, he is a lotus flower, and created a god that would soon become Ayyappa, who was a god born of two men. And so, this has a lot of different moving pieces to it, right? Like in one lens, you could analyze it as transgenderism,
Sure.
because Lord Vishnu transformed into one of his avatars as a beautiful woman. In another lens, you could analyze it as just homosexuality, because it was technically like his prophecy was to be a son of two men. And you can analyze the bisexual angle because, like had wives, and they were both like interested in, I guess, like women as we perceive them, though Hindu gods are technically formless. So there's a lot of different depictions and analysis of this myth. However, you can't generally use it to understand the general LGBTQ dialogue in Hinduism. So, bisexuality and homosexuality, at least in Hinduism, and I know in the rest of the world, go way back.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is what's so surprising to me is just how far back this stuff goes, and that we're still dealing with a lot of, prejudices.
And a lot of it, came, surprise, surprise, with European colonialism.
Yeah,
which,
colonization.
Yeah, well-known
Sure.
fact. So,
Yeah, it really
19th century,
fucked us up,
right?
guys. It really fucked us up.
we really, like, honestly just, like, yeeted and, like, fucked it up.
Yeah,
But,
we really
like,
did.
So if we go back to, like, ancient Japan as for an example of this, so in 1873, the Kaiken Code goes into effect, which was basically a localized version of the Napoleonic Code, which was over in Europe at the time, which was a draconian set of laws outlining how people should live, essentially, and it criminalized, quote unquote, sodomy. Really,
any kind of homosexual relation.
Essentially, yes. And so that happened in 1873 in Japan, and it was influenced. The Kaiken Code was really influenced by kind of a pseudo-scientific sexology that was coming over from Europe and developing in Japan at the time. So, yeah, like for real. So, like,
Yeah.
honestly, once again, Europeans coming in hot with some, like, pseudo-scientific bullshit.
Well, I think a lot of it is interesting because, we have just, if we look at science as a whole and how it's developed from 1873 to how it is developed now, like, we look back at that and it's seen as extremely primitive, and it's so incredibly important that now we take science and we use science as hard-based fact because science influences culture. Like we see in this perfect example of how science, air quotes on science, influenced entire cultures and basically just took the voice away and invalidated an entire group of people that has been around since the beginning of humanity. We gotta hold each other accountable, man.
So, Vaishnavi, what do you think about the persistent erasure of queer women, and especially bisexuality in ancient history and also modern history? Because, we were doing the reading for this. I don't know what kind of problems you all encountered, but mine was that I kept, trying to find accounts of bisexual women in ancient texts and
you don't find them.
didn't have a ton of luck.
Right.
So, what's your take on that, Vaishnavi and Maggie?
Yeah, well, I think it's based off of a lot of different gender prejudices, right?
Yes.
Obviously we have that notion that history is written by the winners, and the winners have, consistently been men or white men. So there's those different gender dynamics. Like, for example, if you're, a bisexual woman, and you express that identity by, being with another woman, then you think, like, first off, you're deviant from society. Like, why aren't you with a man? Secondly, you're threatening men's place as, like, the wooers of women, or, like, the traditional people who seduce women. And, thirdly, it causes a lot of confusion, right? So people don't know if they can perceive you as, like, a good, respectable society woman because you're attracted to men, or if they should completely discriminate against you because you're attracted to women. And so there's really a categorization. You can't fully say, like, I'm lesbian, or, like, I'm, like, super gay, like, so it's interesting that, queer women have been erased from history, even though there wasn't really a place for them, sadly, even in the beginning,
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, Maggie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of history, that's absolutely 100% true, and it's terrible, and what's even worse is that even today in 2019, we still see that. I've had conversations with, friends and family, and they tell me that they don't, not necessarily from a place of hate, like, they're trying to understand and they're trying to learn, and they have asked me before, just because they know that I'm interested and I read about this kind of stuff, and I have friends who identify as bisexual or who are queer, and they ask me, like, hey Maggie, what do these people believe, and, like, what do they have to say, how do they identify, what is the whole deal with it? And I say, well, they're attracted to both men and women. And lots of the time I get responses of, oh, well, they just haven't made up their mind. Like, that's the top response that I get from people is, first of all, I don't understand, and second of all, they're either gay and they just don't want to admit it yet, or they're straight and they just are experimenting because they don't exactly know yet. And it's just kind of invalidating and erasing the sexuality that has been going on in these women since the beginning of time. And lots of the time it's really sad because they don't ask those questions about men. Like, if a man is attracted to both men and women, then lots of the time they just go on their way and they say, oh, this is a totally normal thing, this is fine. But for a woman, it's not. And I've also seen cases where if you're comparing a bisexual man and a bisexual woman, most people will they'll go towards the tendency of saying, oh, the bisexual man is really just gay,
Right.
and the bisexual woman is really just straight, and that goes back to the normality of the man being the center of all sexual attraction. And I think that's just that's a really, really toxic and difficult way.
Damaging.
It invalidates. It's damaging. Exactly. Thank you. It's
the big sad.
yeah.
It's a large sad, friends.
It's damaging, and it erases women's validity, and it erases women's autonomy and sexual expression and just expression of self in general. And it's been going on since the beginning of time, and it's really, really sad to see it still going on today.
It's an actual yikes, my dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something interesting that we touched on was the blurred lines between sexuality, because it absolutely, is a spectrum: sexuality, gender identity, what have you. And so, the visual expression of, I'm going to keep relating things back to Japan, because that's kind of, Japan and Greece are what I got.
Very good.
I'm not, in case you hadn't noticed, I'm not an expert in
None of us are.
in anything.
But we do what we can.
In literally anything.
We're proud of you. You do so good.
But in post-war.
Stop thinking you are an expert in many things,
This is
you gotta
true. You are.
lift yourself up, friend,
Dabbing.
As women, you gotta be confident in our abilities, and I am confident in you, Katie Davis.
I'm confident in you too.
I don't know
You're
if I can go on
amazing.
this podcast.
You go, Katie.
So, I'm empowered now. So, in post-war Japan, a lesbian identity kind of began to take hold, and then really, hit its stride in the 90s, along with a lot of other similar movements around the world. And then one of my takeaways from all the reading that I've done, at least, is that in Japan and Greece, in Mangaia and a lot of cultures, sex acts were not explicitly linked to sexual identity. So you wouldn't say, oh, I'm gay, I'm bisexual, I'm pan, I'm ace, I don't know. You would just kind of follow a different sexual script. And that happened to include men having sex with men and men having sex with women. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I think that's really interesting,
Yeah.
Because it seems to be a better culture, to be LGBT than necessarily having to identify yourself all the time, which, is another thing that can be a little difficult for bisexual people.
Yeah.
Or pansexual people, or, people who are attracted to multiple, just people who are not monosexual,
Yes.
It can be kind of difficult to be like, oh, I'm, 30% attracted to men and 70% attracted to women. So I guess I'm not a lesbian, but I guess I'm by saying bi, I don't want to be 50-50 because I'm more attracted to one gender than the other.
Sure.
Because it's super difficult to label yourself like that. And not saying that anybody necessarily needs labels, and people can just choose labels they're comfortable with, as long as they don't infringe on the identity of the community. But
Absolutely.
I feel like it would be a more friendly culture to describe your sexuality based off of sex acts that you're interested in, or sex acts that you're not interested in. And I wonder if it's a Western identity thing that we have to constantly put ourselves in boxes or labels, because
absolutely.
people are just confused about how to categorize each other, or if it's just a human nature thing to want to categorize ourselves.
Yeah, I like that you bring up the idea of labels, because some people find it limiting, some people find it empowering.
Some people find it
and
freeing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. And liberating. So, to each her own. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that takes us to, if it's all right, if we might jump across the pond a bit. I guess we're not really jumping across the pond. We're jumping across a bunch of land.
A bunch of land, and
like, a few
partially like a
seas.
couple of seas.
Yeah, we're jumping across the Mediterranean
But we're
and like
jumping.
a few minor straits.
Yeah, we're
to
doing
get
a jump.
to get to ancient Greece, where again sexual relationships with adult men.
A true hotbed of sexuality.
Absolutely.
Ancient Greece. Bruh.
Tell 'em, Vaishnavi, tell 'em.
I remember hearing a lot of things about ancient Greece, you know, being such a, I don't want to say a sexually liberated culture, not necessarily, but like a culture where sexual needs were definitely served,
Right.
particular sexual needs of men. And I remember hearing so much about like all of these like brothels that were like legal and open in ancient Greece, and you know how they would both employ women and men and young boys, and you know particularly hearing about Sparta. Because
Yes.
Sparta had a particular culture of sending boys away to basically a military academy, where they would train and just live with other boys. So a majority of Sparta's population, I remember reading, would be bisexual, because they would be interested in men that they would be seeing in their training, but also like women and,
Right.
and things of that nature. So you know, Katie, please let us know what you've learned.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up Sparta, because
This is Sparta.
yeah, because
I knew you would say that. I knew somebody would take advantage of that opportunity.
we can't let it go. Yeah, so in a biography of Lycurgus of Sparta, I hope I said that right. I don't speak Greek, so sorry everyone. But Plutarch depicts relationships between older women and young girls in Sparta, city-state of Sparta, that were similar to the man-boy sexual relationship in Greece and in that of ancient Japan, which in Greece was called the Erastes, which was the older man, and then the Eromenos, which was the younger man. And so I found that very interesting because, again, accounts of bisexuality in women in ancient Greece were few and far between. Everyone has heard, I hope, of Sappho, famous poet, very, very famous poet. And she was, she's generally known for her gorgeous lyricism and for writing about female homosexual desire. And I actually had a passage that I wanted to read from Sappho 94, because some people have debated whether or not she's depicting, say, close female friendships. And I read some papers. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, she is from the island of Lesbos. Dude, lesbianism is named for her.
Yeah.
So,
Excuse me.
to anyone, this is, okay, the poet in me. To anyone who thinks that Sappho is merely writing about close female friendships, listen to this from Sappho 94. Quote,
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
for real though, that's not what she said. She said, okay, this isn't the entire thing, it's just a quote, but I could pull up the entire poem if you want, I love it. Ahem. With quantities of flowery perfume, fit for a queen even, you anointed yourself all over, and on soft beds, delicate, you have satisfied desire. Sounds platonic.
Yeah, please.
Which is another word that used to mean sexual, and now means friendship. Yep. Fun facts. Fun facts learned by all.
Wow, this is the funnest of facts.
This is the funnest of facts.
I feel so fun and
Butters
factual.
away.
Me too. I read that some scholars speculate that Plato, well, we're on the subject of Platonic, a little wordy Wednesday for you. There are a lot of wordy Wednesdays.
We are going deep
Yeah,
into history.
there are quite a
so
few scholars who
it's-
speculate that Plato was either gay or bi, or, and then I read at least one scholar, what was his name? James Neal, who wrote The Origins and Role of Same-Sex Relationships in Human Society, argued that the poet Horace was bisexual. So fun facts, if you need more bicons in your life. So that's, I don't know if that's a real word, I just pulled that out of somewhere.
And in the vein, while we're still talking about ancient Greece and just poetry and works as a whole, I don't know if any of you all are familiar with the famous play Lysistrata.
I want to talk about Lysistrata.
I love Lysistrata. For those of you who don't know Lysistrata, I will do, you will learn, we will learn you a thing. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with what Lysistrata is, Lysistrata is a comedy by Aristophanes, one of the 4 great playwrights of ancient Greece. He was the only comedy writer, fun fact. The other 3 were all tragedy writers. And Lysistrata is a play that takes place during wartime in Greece. So between Sparta and Athens and all these different regions. And essentially this woman named Lysistrata, she gets everybody, all the women in the surrounding enemy towns. She's an Athenian woman, and she gathers people from Sparta and from Corinthian and from all these other places, and essentially says, okay, so our husbands are all going to be home for 15 days. There was a 15-day truce that was being signed for the husbands to come home and basically take a break from war so that they can, get their lives together. And they said Lysistrata said, the only way for this war to end is for us to withhold any and all sexual relations from our husbands.
LOL.
And they all essentially said, LOL, you're crazy. Because they had, gone without having sexual relations with their husbands for upwards of 9-10 months. And so had their husbands, and they said, like, oh, not only do I not want to do that, but there's no way that my husband would let me do that. And so she finally convinces the women to sign a treaty and to basically say, give their oath and give their word and say, hey, we're gonna withhold sex from our husbands so that the war will stop. And the husbands come home and they dress themselves in these super thin, silky robes and wear a ton of perfume and make themselves look and smell amazing, and they flirt really heavily with their husbands, and then they deny them any kind of sexual activity. And within, I think it's 4 or 5 days, something like that, a treaty is signed and the war is over.
Wow.
And I just really, really love that play for a couple of reasons. The main one is just because I love how the women take control, and they basically take over the Capitol, and they stay in the Capitol building, and they build a barricade so that nobody can come in. They build a barricade.
You with the barricade, listen to this. No one is coming to help you to fight. You have no chance. No chance at all. Why throw your lives away?
So they build a wall, I'm going to say wall this time, to shut out any of the men, and they actually take charge of the treasury because they decide that they should be in charge of the money since everybody else is using money for war.
Treasury
and
estate.
The men basically come up and tell them, like, how are you gonna be able to run the treasury? You're just women. And they say, we run the finances of every household and we do all these things. Like, you think you're capable of it? We're in this massive war and it's all your fault.
Actually
We're the
go
ones
off.
who are controlling things. And it's great because I love to see that autonomy of the women of Greece. But it's also kind of sad because it was a comedy. And essentially, the only reason that it could be put on and basically accepted by Greek society was because they said, ha ha ha, isn't that so funny? Women taking control of their own bodies and handling the situation themselves. Isn't that hilarious? And then it was a comedy that's been used in theater up until literally today. It's one of the great comedies, and I don't know. I love it as a woman because it's great, but it also really kind of sucks.
Yeah.
As a woman.
It's like Tanning with the Shrew. It's like, how do I feel about that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. But it's just in a similar vein of, women being erased from history and kind of being made as jokes, and I thought it was in a similar vein with ancient Greek history. So
Thank you so much for that. I just learned a lot.
fun stuff.
I've
Yeah.
never read Lysistrata.
It's really good. It's hilarious.
Oh my god. Okay, I'll have to give it a
Just
read.
the language as a whole. It's not the plot. The plot isn't hilarious because the plot, empowers you as a woman. It empowers you as a woman, but just the language and dialogue is just really funny. It's good stuff. Would recommend. I just think it's so interesting that people say, I don't understand. I've had people tell me just with complete confusion, like, I don't understand, and I don't know, to me it's always seemed just so simple, and that's not to say that it's not a complex thing, and like your sexuality is simple and simplistic, because that's not what it is. It's very individual and personalized, but I don't know, just to me, it makes perfect sense. Like,
Right.
it's like, oh, you're just attracted to both.
Yeah.
And it's,
Or
that's,
everyone.
that's what, or everyone. But for bisexuality specifically, it's you're attracted to men and women. And I've had people say, like, that's not a thing, that's,
What are you talking about?
that's
People are hot.
fake. That's fake, you know, and I'm just like, it doesn't, I don't understand how it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I guess, as a few closing remarks that I have, I can say, like, people, life is confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like in general. But, it's important to apply an intersectional perspective when we discuss social issues because, yeah, we can say, like, oh, like, sexuality is confusing or, like, labels are confusing or things of that nature. But things might be even more difficult or even more, I guess, different. Not necessarily more difficult, but, like, for people of varying identities, right? Like, for example, people of color,
Sure.
you might feel that I don't have the agency to, like, fully make a decision about my sexuality thus far because, perhaps, like, I've grown up in, an immigrant community where, different types of sexuality aren't necessarily that accepted, or you might feel like, well, like, I have to find a label for my sexuality right now so that I can explain it to other people who may be, having a hard time adjusting to a new culture, let alone, sexuality that deviates from the norm of straightness. And things might be even more difficult for, like, people who are very religious, right? Like, people who are, like, maybe very Christian might have a harder time accepting their sexuality or, like, understanding sexuality than people who may not be as religious. And it could go the other way. Like, people who aren't as religious might have a harder time than people who are. And, there's just a lot of intersectional perspectives that, combine to make a person's perspectives and ideologies and how they see the world. And sexuality itself is very confusing, it's a spectrum, but I personally think the way that we should approach sexuality education or discussing sexuality is with compassion, and open-mindedness for the other party, regardless if they're, like, somebody that's, like, very confused about their own sexuality or somebody that's very confused about how to understand sexuality because of their upbringing. And I understand that comes with a lot of emotional labor. So I feel that, activists should only provide what they can for that moment because you need to take care of yourself also while understanding the plethora of ideologies that go into making someone's perspectives. And hopefully, we can make the world a better place for people of different sexualities.
That was beautiful.
I think that's a great way to
It's a good way to wrap this up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode of the VagCast.
Yeah, we hope you learned something.
Yeah, this is the first episode with all three of us, actually.
Yay!
Yeah.
Not in the same place. Which
Even
is
if
sad,
one of
but
us is a
we're all
disembodied
here.
voice right
Oh my
now.
gosh,
The
I'm
disembodied
sorry.
voice of the
I-
living newspaper.
Being a disembodied voice is my part-time job.
Is it really? That's amazing. Is that what your internship is?
Yes, absolutely. Literally this entire summer, I'm just, working as a disembodied voice.
Mhm. That well, I mean, kudos to you, Vaishnavi.
Yeah.
You make a wonderful disembodied
You do a
voice.
great job.
Maybe one day we'll have a podcast with all of us physically there.
Yeah, wow.
Will that day ever turn up? Tune in next week to find out.
It will. It will.
Well, thank you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.
All right.
All right.
G-Y-N-E-C-O-L-O-G-Y. It's a misunderstood field of study. So I'm gonna debunk some myths about the vulva and hymen. Show you all who's the real OG-G-Y-N.